Keep 312. Keep 312.
The people who work to keep you safe, firefighters and police officers, converging on the state capitol in Lansing today. Protests over proposed budget cuts are rolling into a second day.
24-Hour News 8's political reporter Rick Alvin is live in Lansing where all the action went down. Rick?
Well, there are a lot of things in Lansing that people have decided to protest. And I should point out, while this is the second day of protest, they are nothing like the protests that we have seen, for example, in Wisconsin. And in fact, today, those protests weren't really about the budget. They were about some very specific legislation that those firefighters and public safety officers think could have a negative impact on them. Tony Tagliavia was here for a hearing, just a hearing. The bill has not been voted on yet, but it brought out a lot of folks.
It brought out hundreds of police officers and firefighters from across the state. We talked with people from West Michigan, police officers, firefighters, but also government officials who were called to testify on the other side of this issue at that committee hearing. The issue in question is a state law that requires an outside arbitrator to be brought in for labor disputes involving police officers and firefighters.
Keep 312. Keep 312.
It's called Public Act 312, and protesters, including Kentwood firefighter and state union leader Sean Abbey, want to keep it in place.
This act has worked since 1969, and the main goal of this act is to keep firefighters and police officers on the street where they belong, protecting the citizens.
Keep 312.
Abbey and Grand Rapids police officer Dave Leonard say before the law, there were problems like officer sickouts when labor disputes came up. They say the law helps keep officers on the streets by creating a fair process to settle disputes. Ottawa County Administrator Al Vanderberg calls the same process undemocratic.
Because an elected board of commissioners in a county basically does not have the authority to set the wage and major legacy benefit costs such as pensions. It's done by an outside party to the county.
Governor Rick Snyder was asked about the dispute today.
I respect my partners in the legislature for having issues they want to address, and they're going through their process. We're just going to continue to work together, and again, my primary focus right now is budget and tax.
So Governor Rick Snyder there suggesting this isn't really one of his priority issues, though he didn't say that he would veto it. Again, this is still in committee, hasn't been voted on by the House or Senate. One of the big points by these union protesters today is they say without this law that cities could just force contracts on them. We put that question to Representative Joe Havman. He's the Holland Republican who proposed this legislation. He says proposed legislation to get rid of this current law, I should say. He says without the current law, firefighters and police officers would still have collective bargaining and mediation just like other public workers do, and he says that works. Rick?
It's interesting what the governor was talking about today, because outside of his budget, there are these other issues such as PA 312 and also another set of bills that passed the House today. We told you about them last night at 5 and 6. They would provide for emergency managers for schools and cities around the state if they got into financial trouble. And there are some provisions there that some unions worry could also alter collective bargaining. It doesn't do away with collective bargaining, but it could mean that some contracts after the fact could be altered if a city got into financial hardship. Now that, combined with the story that Tony was just telling, and a number of other issues, have generated quite a bit of attention here in Lansing. We have seen protests for 2 days in a row. I would expect that this will not be the last protest, and there will come a time, the budget was dropped over in the House today, I am told, there will come a time when there will be more protest about the budget. Now, so far, it hasn't, as I said earlier, been like Wisconsin. But there is a lot on the table, and there are some big changes that could potentially take place, which is why we will continue our commitment to be here in Lansing to bring you the very latest every day, because what happens here does, of course, impact you. We're live in Lansing. I'm Rick Albin, 24-Hour News 8.